People's hometown full-line outdoor sporting products and gear store. An interactive talk show discussing self-defense, product reviews, shooting tips, safety, and more. Your calls, comments, and texts welcome at 343-0106. Now, here are your hosts, retired judge and certified NRA instructor Rusty Johnston and certified NRA law enforcement instructor Adam Strange.
They're gonna pry these guns right out of my hands when they come to take them away. I believe in the rights that my fathers gave me when they signed the Constitution that day. No misguided president or crooked politician with a greasy pocket be spared. When the hard-working man gets tired of your cry, it's gonna rain wrath, beware. Don't tread on me, I'm American free. You're not gonna take it away. I stand up to fight for my freedoms and rights. That's the price you'll have to pay. Don't tread on me, I'm American free. Red-blooded to the core. You ain't ever had a fight in your life like a fight that you're itching for.
All right, welcome to Armed Alabama, 2-hour show from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. where we discuss self-defense, firearm and ammo selection, home protection, concealed carry training, proper range etiquette, and much, much more, including Alabama law, Mississippi law, and Florida law. So if you have a question, by all means,
Intergalactic law tonight, too, with their probation officer, Jody Highfield, expert in intergalactic probation offenses.
we're glad you could join us tonight. And if you have a good gift that Santa Claus brought you, by all means call in and tell us about it. If you have any questions regarding it, that gift, that would be a good topic as well for tonight. So if you want to share what Santa Claus brought you, if you have any questions about it, by all means call in with that as well. You can call in our studio at 251-343-0106. If you're just joining us for the first time, this is Armed Alabama, and I'm Adam Strange. I'm a certified NRA law enforcement instructor, and with me is Judge Rusty Johnston. Judge, you want to talk about yourself real quick?
Well, I'm certified NRA instructor in 2 fields, pistols, revolvers. Well, I guess that's one, actually. And, what is it called? NRA home hardening, let's call it that. Guide to safety at the home, but which teaches you how to harden your home. We had a good, by the way, if you didn't see it, we had a great show on that a couple of weeks ago. I was a circuit judge for 18 years, and I was the director of the court police for 10 years. So anything you want to know about crime, unfortunately, I know about it. And one thing we're going to talk about tonight, as little as we know, we'll mention, and if we may be able to develop some facts, the shooting out in Saraland. And I think our probation officer will tell you anytime you walk into a domestic situation, it's dangerous.
Absolutely. And of course, there were some things that was probably everyone is aware of now, maybe with the mental health issues there. And there's some things that we can talk about tonight. And I think it's important that we're all aware of mental health issues pertaining to ownership of firearms and so forth.
You know, one thing interesting, I got interested in that because every time there is some kind of, especially a mass shooting, that issue comes up.
Yes.
And none of the shooters that have been involved recently, and they also did a forensic study after he was dead of the guy up in the shooting up in Connecticut, the school, can't think, Newtown. None of those people have been found not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. And all the experts say of all the shootings and violence that they've studied, that actually people with mental health issues are only slightly more prone to commit violent acts. And it's nothing like mass shootings. It's, let's say, standing in a long line and they get anxious because of that, and then they kind of go berserk. That most people with serious mental illness, they can't even get out of the house, can't even drive. And it kind of opened my eyes. They're more likely to be a victim that is it's one of these things they've come up with again because they want to classify veterans as mentally unstable so they can deny gun rights to them. And they could deny gun rights to whole classes of people that there's no evidence whatsoever that they're any more prone to commit violent acts. If you can show that, gosh, I'd be the first one. But it sounds good, but I'm not so sure it's really there.
Yes. And that's a good point. I think this is the first thing, maybe a knee-jerk reaction with individuals to say, oh, yeah, there was mental illness involved. But just like you said, the statistics just don't really show it.
And, one thing, I know it's the rule in this state by virtue of a federal court decree, probably is around the country, that abusing drugs and alcohol does not classify itself as a mental illness. And there are a couple of reasons for that, but one is that can't get you committed into a mental hospital. That's deemed to be a voluntary thing that you're doing, as opposed to something that, for some reason comes on you, schizophrenia and various disorders like that. But you say it anyway.
Absolutely. But thank you for tuning in tonight.
You mentioned Facebook Live?
Yes, we're actually on Facebook Live. So if you want to, go and check us out on a Facebook Live. We're broadcasting there, and that is Armed Alabama Radio, FM Talk 106.5. That's our Facebook page. So please join us on that, comment, like it. And also on Twitter.
Get that.
Armed Alabama is on Twitter, Armed Alabama 106.5. And, of course, our website is armedalabama.com. Be sure and go on there. There's lots of information that we have posted. We also have a link there where you can sign up for our classes that we're going to be having in the future. Hopefully we can have one sometime in January.
And by the way, to answer 4 emails, because I didn't have the date pegged down, that wanted to know when class dates are, we'll have one in January. We don't have it nailed down.
Yeah.
So that's
got a lot going on.
Hopefully they're listening.
A lot going on in January, but hopefully we can nail down the Saturday. And if you're interested in class, by all means, go on there and you can find out information about that. Or you can just email us. You can email me, Adam at armedalabama.com, or the judge at armedalabama.com.
But right now, don't email and say, when's the class? Yeah. We don't know.
We don't know yet. So it's kind of tough. I mean, we got a lot of oars in the waters, the judge and myself, so it's kind of tough.
And when you drink as much as we do, it's just, you got a hangover all the time.
Too much eggnog during the Christmas season.
Just kidding.
But anyway, we'd be glad to hear from you. So if you have any questions or anything else like that, be sure to email us. We always like to hear that. Or you can message us on Facebook. Again, our Facebook page is Armed Alabama Radio, FM Talk 106.5. And if you have questions or comments, you can call into the studio tonight at 251-343-0106. You want to tell us about what you got from Santa Claus. If you have any questions regarding any firearms or ammunition that you had received from Santa Claus, we'll definitely try to answer those questions for you. And we hope you did have a Merry Christmas, and we want to wish you a Happy New Year. We go into January 1. So can't believe 2016 is already coming to a close.
I know.
So we're hoping that 2017 will be a big year.
Yeah, Judge, I wanted to ask you one thing.
This is somebody you probably thought was deceased, but it's Charlie Moss.
That's right. I came back to life for this show. But working a number of years as radio news reporters, I remember we always checked with the legislative offices because there were new laws going on the books January 1st. And I don't know if there's
happened
any
a lot January 1st of 16.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if there's any changes in that part of the Alabama statutes involving gun ownership, control, permitting, or anything that you're aware of, or anything we should be looking at.
And I actually looked the other day. There were a lot regarding it made a lot of changes on the criminal side only. Last January 1st of 16.
Yeah.
But as to the gun laws themselves, no. Not in this state, but remember, you've got to obey the gun laws of other states. In Missouri, where I've got a contact, is changing a number of theirs. One to constitutional carry, where you don't have to have a permit. So, and we'll tell you more about that when we get back after the break with Armed Alabama. This is Judge Rusty Johnston, and one thing that we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes when we're joined by my former and a retired probation officer, Jody Highfield, is how can we make people of Alabama safer in regards to convicted criminals? And we could have the warden there and Cool Hand Luke take care of it, but the courts probably wouldn't go along with that. But there are a lot of things that you think are probably the law, like we have a Habitual Offender Act, but we don't have 3 strikes and you're out. I've had people that had 28 prior felonies, and the current felony they were up for would still not give them life without parole. So there'll be some things we'll be talking about like that will probably surprise you and kind of make you think that we need to change some laws, toughen up some laws, maybe loosen up some laws. That part of the problem is there's not a constituency out there. You know, when you have a family member that's mugged, assaulted, killed, you're kind of an island in and of yourself. It's not like you're a member of the Road Builders Association where you make sure you're at the legislature every year and there's money appropriated to build roads. There's nobody doing that in regards to the prison budget or the corrections budget and the budget for the Department of Pardons and Paroles. It's just there. Individual victims don't go up there saying, you know, my aunt was murdered 3 years ago because you let somebody out of prison early. But there should be. But unfortunately, there's not. If you'll go to our Facebook page, there's an interesting, I've embedded it from our YouTube channel, a 67-year-old veteran on a bus. And, you know, he looks 67, maybe in good shape for that. And he gets into it with some young black tough guy, and I guess he's a white tough guy, and their words, and all of a sudden the old man just practically knocks the young guy out. I mean, there's blood everywhere. The young guy's probably, 25 or something like that. And it's an amazing scene. Somebody that's that old that takes care of the young guy like that. And it's funny, everybody on the bus must know the old guy because they're telling the young guy, don't mess with him, don't stay back, don't mess with him. And he should have heeded their advice. So it's amazing what you can find out there. Let's see, I was going to bring up something that you wanted to bring up, Adam, that we've been meaning to. Well, one thing I wanted to bring up, there's a company I've ordered a lot of stuff from, and it has a lot of stuff called Optics Planet. And I ordered one particular thing from there, and I get this notice, this is barred by federal and state law. It was a telescopic baton. I needed a place that I could buy the baton and the sheath, because all my usual places either had one or the other. This is forbidden, but... And I wrote him back and I said, it is not. And if you can show that to me, I will buy, I won't say I'm X amount of merchandise for you, your choice. It is not. And, well, I get a notice, you will have a reply, there's a computer, within 24 hours. Well, a week later, I couldn't believe the response. Well, we comply with the strictest state law on this subject, which, of course, is California.
Right.
And I said, pardon me for being so blunt, you're insane. You're saying the rest of us have got to live by whatever law California enacts?
That's where they're located.
Well, I'm not so sure that they are.
I looked it up.
Oh, are they really?
Yes, that's where they're located.
Okay.
Now, they could be changed. They could have been changed. It's been over a year.
Can still export it.
Yeah, it's been over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago that I looked at.
There are plenty of places that they will say if you live in the list of states. and they list, hey, if you live in New York, California, we can't ship this to you. We can't ship high. That means, I know they sell magazines, as in that you put in a gun as opposed to clips. That means they can't sell high cap magazines.
Yeah, high capacity.
They're killing themselves as that's their business model.
Yeah, that seems absurd.
That they've got to comply with California. Now,
But I think that's actually where they're located at.
Yeah. But if they have to, now he didn't say that. He said we're gonna comply with the strictest law in the country, and I'm assuming that's California. That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I have probably purchased several $1,000s worth of goods over the past few years there. Not to say I necessarily won't, but I thought if they've got the right prices. But I thought that ought to make people wonder about who's running the company. Very strange.
My thing is
Midway USA had it to me in 24 hours.
Why would they even have it listed on their website if they was not going to sell it to an individual, or would be for LE only, or?
Well, they said LE only. Well, after you really dug into it, and I said, why would I send any LE credentials to a company that sells telescopes? I mean, that's primarily what they start off in the business and sell maybe half the stuff as high-end hunting and, that type scopes. They have a lot of stuff, but they also have a lot of stuff totally unrelated. It was very strange. So, what a business model. All right. What was that item that you wanted to bring up that we've passed over it about 2 weeks? And
I don't know. I'm still in like Christmas mode right now.
Bah humbug. Got to move past that.
I'm still on vacation.
I tell you what we've got coming up. We have got coming up New Year's Eve, and that is the night that the black community traditionally, and I assume it's been adopted by everybody in town, but I had a case involving police and the black community that they fire guns up in the air to celebrate the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. And but I actually read a study and did the math myself that you are totally unlikely to be killed by the bullet coming down because of the drag of the atmosphere on the bullet and, the whole thing like that. And I could find it probably. But even though a bullet may go up at 2,300 feet per second, it takes, I think, 600 feet per second to pierce the skin. But to pierce the skull, it takes something like 1,100. I can't remember all the numbers. But it was interesting to see that conventional wisdom. But still, it's illegal to shoot a firearm in the city of Mobile. And a police officer said 12 years ago, I was on duty, and it sounded like Beirut last night. And he was on his own time, giving his own opinion. And the city laid him off, I may be wrong or two about a date, for 3 days. Personnel board increased it to 7 days. I reversed it and said it was unconstitutional, and I was reversed twice by the Supreme Court because he didn't raise the constitutional issue before the personnel board. The third time, the Supreme Court just reversed me and entered the order. I guess they knew I was never going to do it. But anyway, it was an interesting constitutional issue because he sure as heck had the right to say it. May not have been raised at the appropriate time, but I think that was nonsense, frankly.
So he got 7 days off?
He did, but he actually left that job fairly soon afterwards. And Harold Rowe Robertson, and I don't know where he is these days, but nice guy, and shame that crazy politics like that did that, and that's purely what it was, apparently.
So I think what you were referring to, Judge, on one of my subjects I always like to talk about, it's a pet peeve of mine, is you hear people saying, well, I've been shooting since I was 9 years old, and I already know how to shoot. Ergo, I don't need a class or anything else like that. And that's fine. That's great if you know how to shoot. but it's a different thing entirely to use that firearm in defense of yourself, in defense of your family. There's so much that you don't know. You don't know what you don't know, and that's why it's very important.
Dunning-Kruger syndrome.
Right, exactly. It is very important that you, if you're going to use your firearm, concealed carry, it's very important that you take a class. You don't have to take our class. We prefer you do, because we have a very, very good program, especially with the judge regarding the law and what you should say and what you should not say, how to receive law enforcement, what your rights are. Those things are very, very important, and they go way beyond just knowing how to shoot a firearm. And also in defense of yourself, using that firearm in defense of yourself or your family in very, very stressful environments, which could be very, very close, 10 feet or less most of the time. You'll be faced with a bad guy or whatever, somebody trying to do a dastardly deed.
Absolutely. And, I was one of those people that 15 years ago thought I knew how to shoot.
Absolutely.
And I had to lower my ego and let one of the trainers with the court police, which was different because I learned it the police way, which is fine, but, statistically, they don't have the best shooting record learning the police way. And so the Kenobi way kind of
was always a good place to start.
Right, the fundamentals.
That's the thing. You've got to start somewhere, and that's you and I both did. We continued on.
Right.
And each class we learn more and more. All right, we'll be back with this and much, much more on Armed Alabama after this break.
When you're running down our country, man, you're walking on the fighting side of me. You're walking on the fighting side of me. Running down the way of life.
FM Talk 106.5, the Gulf Coast Weather Authority, and Dr. Bill Williams.
We'll expect patchy fog tonight. There's a slight chance of a shower with temperatures around 60 degrees at daybreak. For Wednesday, mostly cloudy with a slight chance of a shower, highs in the mid-70s. And the outlook for Thursday, morning showers and clearing and cooler in the afternoon with temperatures in the lower 60s. This is meteorologist Dr. Bill Williams for FM Talk 106.5.
For FM Talk 106.5, I'm Roseanne Haven, News 5. We now know the identity of a motorcyclist killed near the intersection of Government Street and Pleasant Valley Road last Thursday, 24-year-old Bradley Rivers. Early reports say a driver hit Rivers while trying to cross 4 lanes of eastbound traffic on Government Street. A once-in-a-lifetime event for a hunter in Washington County. Joshua Williams killed a large and rare piebald deer Saturday morning. Darrell Bell is the president of the local Quality Deer Management Association.
Piebald deer only make up 2% of the population. I've only seen one in my entire life, and it was a fairly big one, like the one that was killed in Washington County.
Williams plans on ordering a full body mount to put in his kitchen. Keep Mobile Beautiful is encouraging you to recycle your Christmas tree. They'll break it down into mulch and offer it to the public for free. Drop-off locations can be found on WKRG.com. For FM Talk 106.5, I'm Roseanne Hayden, News 5.
Could you defend yourself, your family, your home against an assailant? Do you know your legal rights? What is the law on carrying a firearm? Do you know defensive shooting? All of this and more will be taught at Armed Alabama's Level 1 class. For more information, visit armedalabama.com/classes. That's armedalabama.com/classes. When buying a vehicle, don't waste your valuable time. David Parnell at Palmer's Toyota is committed to getting you the best deal on a new, used, or leased car. And David will do that without wasting your time. Don't play the back and forth game. See David Parnell today. Palmer's Toyota, 470 Schillinger Road South. That's David Parnell at Palmer's Toyota, 639-0800, extension 168. Don't forget to see David Parnell at Palmer's Toyota, Schillinger Road, just south of Airport. He won't waste your time.
Step up to the firing line. Armed Alabama is back. Questions, comments, and texts at 343-0106.
You smell that? Ain't fun, son. Nothing else in the world smells like that. I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
It's crazy. Can you hear all right? Hey, this is Judge Jody Johnston, and welcome back to Armed Alabama. I have with us tonight my former probation officer and a retired probation officer with the Alabama Department of Pardons and Paroles, Jody Highfield. And say hello, Jody.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Jody, you were with the Alabama Department of Pardons and Paroles, and for years people knew that office to be at the Bay Hayes building, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And at the very end, maybe last couple of years you were there, you moved almost to Brookley Field.
Moved all the way to 1514 South Broad Street.
Yeah, that was, that was always kind of a problem because I could always explain to people how to get to Bay Hayes. I never knew whether they were really getting to Brooklyn or to where y'all were way down on Broad Street.
The one thing that I always thought was pretty funny about the whole affair, particularly with the older probationers, parolees, they started calling it the New Bay Hayes building.
Great. And,
so we never lost our identities.
It was always kind of chaos there anyway because you had the, I can't remember, they called it the baby daddy court up on in one of your floors. And that's where Department of was not pensions. What is the State Department? They would prosecute people.
Investigation and recovery and Veterans Affairs was in our building.
And they would have, fathers. You used to say illegitimate children, but I guess that's gone from the vocabulary. We used to have, excuse me, folks, bastardy proceedings in court, and that was one of the things you paid. $18 to file a bastardy proceeding, but I assume that is no longer the case. People wouldn't know what that was. But now, how did someone get, obviously I know all these questions, but the people in the audience don't. How did somebody get put on probation and get to you?
Well, the long version...
Remember our camera, too. Show them your smiling face. And tell all your old probationers where you live. So if they want to come by and say, you did such a good job for me.
I'm all over that one.
Yeah.
The long version would be upon someone's arrest, then they would be tried. They'd go through the court process, which would, for a felony case, go through district court for a preliminary hearing. The case would either be waived or bound over to the grand jury. If it came from the grand jury as a true bill, it went to circuit court.
And you've skipped the poor judge having to sign 300 or 400 true bill indictments.
Yes, sir.
Which was always fun.
Judge, you guys might want to explain what true bill or no bill is, just for the audience sake.
Good point.
A true bill would be that the grand jury determined that there is the possibility of a crime. A no bill is that there's no crime. And, of course, that would be the end of the case.
Or at least they didn't have enough evidence of a crime. They may very well have done something, but...
once the case has been prosecuted and the individual is found guilty, the judge would have a number of sentencing options. And one thing that always plays into the part of that is prison population and a threat to society, retribution to society, and then rehabilitation. And obviously, I spent over 25 years in probation and parole, so I certainly believe in rehabilitation. But
we were governed by the law, and the law gave us certain things that we had to consider, and I'm going to look at that while you're talking. Go ahead.
When someone's placed on probation, typically that's going to be directly from the court. It would be a suspended penitentiary sentence with the understanding that if they complied with the rules and regulations of probation, that at some point in time, typically a 5-year probationary period, that they would be released from supervision. Within that time frame, they would be required, for example, a theft case, they would be required to pay the restitution owed to the victim, which if they stole a TV, they may be required to pay $300 for that television set. They'd pay court costs, And also something that a lot of people may not be aware of, they would also be required to pay their attorney fees. Even though an attorney may be appointed and work, they are still assessed a fee for that attorney, which they're responsible for.
And that's something I always had the attorneys fill out a form saying, what's your estimated fee? Because otherwise it was the fair trial tax that did it, and I thought it ought to be assessed against the so-called indigent defendant, many of which who really weren't. They were temporarily indigent, let's put it that way.
And oftentimes, upon the completion of probation, an individual is, once again, like I said, he's removed from supervision, and he would go on to a happy life. Say, for example, that he violated the conditions of probation or parole, then the probation officer would file what we know as a delinquency report. That report would go to the district attorney's office, who would then file a motion to revoke probation. Upon that, the court would have a hearing and determine whether or not the individual violated the conditions of probation. If they were determined to be in violation, their sentence was typically the probation revoked and the sentence was imposed.
Did a lot of those, didn't I?
Yes, sir.
Here's your principles of sentencing, by the way. And, you know, a lot of times we'd catch grief. Why didn't you max somebody out, or why didn't you send them to prison? This is Rule 26.8 of the Rules of Criminal Procedure, and they have the force of law. The sentence imposed in each case should call for the least restrictive sanction that is consistent with the protection of the public and the gravity of the crime. In determining the sentence, the court should evaluate the crime and its consequences and the record of the defendant, and give serious consideration to the goal of sentencing equality and the need to avoid unwarranted disparities. Judges should be sensitive to the impact that their sentences have on all components of the criminal justice system, and should consider alternatives to long-term institutional confinement. They call that mass incarceration now, I think, or incarceration in cases involving offenders whom the court deems to pose no serious danger to society. And I always counter with that by the average burglary, the societal cost of a burglary is around $15,000, and burglars commit 100 burglaries a year. Most are never caught. It's cheaper to keep a burglar in the penitentiary than to have him out, while most burglars burglarize unoccupied dwellings and are no threat. They're causing a lot of economic damage. And, you know, theft is the same way. I mean, how much do our goods go up in stores because of people shoplifting all of the time? We had store security personnel that knew some of the shoplifters by their first names. I remember one in particular where the Walmart security guy said, "Hey, Sean, drop that whatever he had." I mean, he called him by name. So it's amazing. Now, the maximum term in Alabama that you can still put somebody on probation is 5 years.
That's correct, sir. One thing that I'd always ran into a personal conflict with, when you look at a split sentence law, it allows for the balance of the sentence to be placed on probation. So if someone was sentenced to 20 years split 5 years penitentiary, in effect, I believe, based on the statute, that you could sentence someone to 15 years probation. But contrary to that, there's another statute saying the maximum amount of probation for a felony charge is 5 years.
And they want to try to keep it as short as possible. Frankly, I thought to hold costs down. And one of the reasons I liked a longer sentence, a probationary sentence, was when someone, let's say, embezzled $20,000 from their business. It was to keep them on probation, not necessarily coming to the office. After a few years, I'd usually waive that requirement, but I'd order them to pay, let's say, $300 a month, which somebody might be able to pay. But if they had 10 or 15 years to pay it, they could pay it back. 5 years, it was impossible. The reason they stole it was probably they had a gambling problem or something, and they needed money. So there was a move to even shorten that, as I remember, a few years ago. But it failed, fortunately. Got a couple of more, but we're kind of up on a break. Now, you handled probation. You also handled doing what we call pre-sentence evaluations. Tell us what that is.
A pre-sentence investigation would consist of reporting on an individual's background. And basically, you would like to go at least from birth to whatever age he's at as of today.
Well, considering some we had were 12 years old, it was pretty easy.
And, you would take that, fortunately, a conscientious judge, which I certainly enjoyed the benefit of sharing Judge Johnston with, he's certainly conscientious, would take the effects of a background and a child rearing into effect as to what led to a criminal activity and criminal behavior. So a pre-sentence investigation would be very important. It would take into account a subject's background, the amount of crimes they had committed in the past, and the current crime and the instance of offense, or whatever the details of the offense would be of a particular crime.
Yeah, one time you handled the sex offender caseload, and that's such a...
I prefer to use the word monitor.
Monitor, yeah, right. And that's a totally different group of people. But I was reading about a sex offender in another state, and they said, it was a teacher to school, that got us that rock music coming in, but somebody said, why don't they do background checks? And I thought to myself, because he, like the good ones, would have showed up clean. Because no doubt he's probably committed some, but the good ones don't get caught. The really pretty poor ones, they get caught over and over and over again. But the ones that are pretty clumsy, they get caught when they're 19. But we're going to have to step into this break. But let's be thinking about that, because that scares a lot of people, and it should. But some of the solutions probably aren't as good as others. The conventional, I don't think what we have now is the right solution. And I'll kind of tell you what I would do and see what you think of it when we get back, because some states know how to do it right, and Colorado is one that does it right. But we'll be back after the break with more of Armed Alabama.
Jack Nicholson, boy, he's great.
You can shoot through that door, can't you?
All right, welcome back to Armed Alabama. I'd like to give our sponsors and advertisers a quick shout-out. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be on the air, and those are David Parnell at Palmer's Toyota, Dr. Justin Foster at Foster's Chiropractic of Tillman's Corner, David Grayson of Grayson Heating and Air, and, of course, McCoy Outdoors and the law office of Matt Green. So glad you could join us tonight and listen to Armed Alabama. If you would like to advertise your show, if you'd like to advertise your business on Armed Alabama's show, be sure and contact us. You can contact me, Adam, at armedalabama.com, or the judge at armedalabama.com. We would love to have your business advertised on the show.
All right, one thing we were talking about is sex offenders. And let me tell you what really brought this to mind. Anytime we had a sex case, we did what we call voir dire, but we questioned prospective jurors. And I like to word the question in the way it won't embarrass people. So one of the questions that I asked, that the DA asked me to ask, but I changed the wording, have you or any member of your family been a victim of any type of crime, especially a sex offense? So that, and I said, and if you'd like to step up here and talk about it with just me and the court reporter and the lawyers, feel free. Well, when they stood up, there wasn't an automatic association that it was them. I had 40% of the men one time come up, some crying, admitting they had been victims of a sex offense. talk about a bummer. I mean, we couldn't believe it. So now, granted, many of these were years ago, but my theory is, or proposition is, that since most sex offenses are committed against either members of the family or close personal friends, kids, they're not snatch and grabs from the local elementary school. But we've set up a system that's what we're trying to prevent. You can't live within, X number of feet of the elementary school. And all. So there are like 8 places in Mobile County where we've concentrated the sex offender. What Colorado does, and a number of states, they dump that. You have to keep your registration on file like you do anybody under supervision. They have lifetime supervision because you never get over this problem. The judge can cut that shorter, but it's up to lifetime supervision. And then, depending on what your problem is, he can order some of the older antidepressants. The main side effect was that it reduced, if not eliminated, your libido, in scientific here. So he would order that to be prescribed for the, what do you call somebody under supervision? I always say defendant, but...
I think the popular term would be client, but I always referred to him as a convict.
Yeah, a felon, yeah. Okay. And to make sure they took it, they would have usually an LPN at the probation office. They'd have to go by there, depending on what kind of drug it was, every day or every other day, and take it in front of them, kind of like you give your dog a pill, and make sure they took it. Then they would have to go to the group therapy. They could not drink alcohol, and their house was searched periodically for the presence of alcohol, because alcohol lowers the inhibitions. A lot of people can't get up the nerve to molest somebody unless they're drinking and they offer drink or marijuana to kids. And there's also search for pornography, obviously. And they could not have the internet unless it was filtered through several different companies, mostly religious companies. They didn't force religion on people, but they had real good filters that kept every type of pornography out. And then they did something kind of like we did, either polygraphing or voice stress analyzing, and they didn't have to pay for it, basically, because I think just the threat of that, the threat hanging over their heads, forces, you're not going to make a crazy person comply. But there are a lot of these folks, as you know, that they can comply just till they're off probation. And then, what do you think about something like that?
I fully concur. And I think, and not to sound trite, but an individual case-by-case basis.
Right.
I've probably monitored 300 sex offenders in my career, and had a specific sex offender caseload for a little over a year. The vast majority of the sex offenders will comply with virtually everything, and their life is structured to the point that there's kind of just no hits, no runs, no errors. They have a very orderly life, except for that one deviant factor, which is obviously explosive. So they tend to really stay on top of the current law, current legislation, what's coming through the state houses. They're very aware, and often even more aware than the officer.
Pretty cunning, and that tells me.
And they are. And I always took an attitude that I wasn't clever enough to get inside their head. So
I don't want to get inside their head, I'll tell you that.
With the monitoring of mental health professionals, that's how I kept that in check with the probationers and parolees on a sex offender caseload. It's just refer to the expert, because it's just over my head as far as their mentality and what all they're capable of doing. But hiding things and covering up their activity is paramount.
Their whole day, if not life, is wrapped around how am I going to obtain, how am I going to molest this child?
In my opinion, yes, sir.
That's
I would
what this
concur.
Frank was psychiatrist from Taylor Hardin was telling me. And by the way, she offered to. She said she really needed an anesthesiologist too, I guess, to do castrations if I would do a test case on that. She was tough, but it's just like I say. I think we've given people a false sense of security. And by the way, folks, anybody wants to call on any of these subjects and on probation, or people have questions about pardons, getting their voting rights back. Officer Highfield knows about all of this. I know it because I read it in a book or have seen it in action. He's done it, so there's a big difference. But that's something that we need to just tighten up on a little, because, it just devastates. An 8-year-old child's life is devastated if that happens. And not that, every crime's not preventable, but a lot are. But just making somebody live in a mobile home park in a certain part of the county, that doesn't do a lot to keep that from happening. But
I think the most important thing is get informed, make yourself aware, and don't allow yourself or one of your children become a victim. Pay attention to what's going on in school, pay attention to what's going on in the neighborhood, and pay attention to what's going on in your own home. Particularly with the proliferation of the internet, Xbox, PlayStation, these children have a tremendous access to outside entities and nefarious individuals that prey on the fact that it is internet, and you can really be whoever you want to be on the internet.
And if you've got an uncle you hadn't seen in a long time that moves back in town and always offers to babysit your 8-year-old son, I mean, I shouldn't say this, but I could hardly tolerate being around my own children. I sure didn't want to be around other people's children. And I just think most men, that's kind of the way it is. And men that seek out to babysit and be around other people's children, that's a little out of the ordinary.
Pretty creepy, and if it gives you the creeps, it's probably because it is creepy.
That's the Gavin D. Beaker book.
Pay attention to when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. There's a reason for that, and don't suppress it, investigate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid to be non-PC. Just say, I don't feel comfortable you keeping my child. And if you have to go one step further because I think you're a freak, just end it that way. Your child is worth it. So, got to step into a break. We'll be back. Give us some calls. Don't be timid, because this is a very important topic, and we want to inform you. We'll be back after the break with more of Armed Alabama.
Could you defend yourself, your family, your home against an assailant? Do you know your legal rights? What is the law on carrying a firearm? Do you know defensive shooting? All of this and more will be taught at Armed Alabama's Level 1 class. For more information, visit armedalabama.com/classes. That's armedalabama.com/classes.
The safety is on. There's a round in the chamber. This is Armed Alabama. Sponsored by McCoy Outdoor Company, Mobile's hometown full-line outdoor sporting products and gear store. An interactive talk show discussing self-defense, product reviews, shooting tips, safety, and more. Your calls, comments, and texts welcome at 343-0106. Now, here are your hosts, retired judge and certified NRA instructor Judge Johnston, and certified NRA law enforcement instructor Adam Strange.
They're gonna pry these guns right out of my hands when they come to take them away. I believe in the rights that my fathers gave me when they signed the Constitution that day. No misguided president or crooked politician with a greasy pocket be spared. When the hard-working man gets tired of your cry, It's gonna rain rap, beware. Don't tread on me, I'm American free. You're not gonna take it away. I stand up to fight for my freedoms and rights. That's the price you'll have to pay. Don't tread on me, I'm American free. Red-blooded to the core. You ain't ever had a fight in your life like the fight that you're reaching for.
All right, welcome back to the second hour of Armed Alabama. That was Buck Allen song Don't Tread on Me, and we kind of use that as our theme song, and we're glad that Buck Allen allows us to use that. Be sure and check him out. Check out his Facebook page, Buck Allen, singer-songwriter on Facebook. Glad you can join us. This is the second hour of a 2-hour show from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., where we talk about self-defense, firearm and ammo selection, home protection, concealed carry, training, proper range etiquette, and much, much more. We have joining us tonight, retired parole officer Jody Highfield is in the studio with us, and he's provided a great deal of content. You should have heard some of the intellectual conversations we had during the break about shooting guns on the moon. So that was always that was a good subject, and we'll have to get back to that. Can you shoot a gun on the moon, and will it go up in the atmosphere or come back down, or it will just reach terminal velocity and leave the orbit of the moon? I don't know. That's a good question to look up. How we got on that subject, I have no idea.
I don't think you can do it. It needs oxygen. It needs oxygen in order to the primer to ignite, and so I don't think you can do it.
I don't know. I think there's enough oxygen, maybe, and propellant within the casing, the cartridge, rather, to for it to go off. But that's something.
I think the cosmic rays would destroy that, the propellant, and so there.
The quote was not was. It was worse pay, better hours, and then worse pay and better fellow workers.
There you go. Google that sometime. Google that under Google Scholar. How about that? Officer Highfield, Jody.
Yes, sir.
I was in kind of preliminary. I was mentioning that. And listen, we're taking calls 343-0106-251, the area code. But if any of you have questions about any firearm subject, if you got a gun for Christmas. Remember, as Matt Canovey says, it ain't Christmas unless you got a gun under the tree. Let us know what you got. But if you got questions about parole, pardons, anything like that, give us a call. I've got the man with us that can answer the questions. But most people in Alabama think, we got some, think we got one, we'll get to in a second. Most people think we have a 3 strikes law, get convicted, and of 2 felonies, the third, you get life without parole. That's not true, is it?
No, sir. My understanding of the law, of course, I'm no attorney, but you have the Habitual Offender Act. And the Habitual Offender Act does enhance subsequent felony convictions. For example, a C felony, which is punishable between a year and a day to 10 years, would be treated as a B felony, which is punishable from, if I'm correct, 2 to 20 years.
Bumps it up like
and
this.
And it just continues to bump it up and ups the ante, but you're never going to achieve a life without parole sentence just based on the Habitual Offender Act.
Unless the last is an A, I think it is. But I always have to look at the chart, because it's very difficult to get a life without parole aside from a capital murder conviction. But it's kind of a deception that everybody likes having the Habitual Offender Act, because it makes it look like we're tough on crime, when and that's not, a lot of the fault now is, mass incarceration. I mentioned that. Well, the way I look at it, the more people in the penitentiary, the safer we are. Either that, or if you want to do away with all the drug laws, do away with them. I mean, as long as they're not driving down the street and running into me or having children, I don't really care. But don't start selling the drugs at the local drugstores, because the prices will go up enormously. That's let's go ahead and see what Brent has to say. Brent, you're on the line with us.
Hey, how are you guys? I heard you're talking about shooting on the moon, and it occurred to me that there's an awful lot of videos on YouTube of guys shooting Glocks underwater, so I'd have to go with it would be pretty easy to fire a large center fire round on the moon.
Well, Adam thinks he has the answer, but remember, water is H2O. Hydrogen and oxygen, but Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, it doesn't have it. There's no time for any of that to separate. There wouldn't be.
All right, well, I think I got the answer. Google says fires can't burn in an oxygen-free environment of space. But modern guns and modern ammunition contains its own oxidizer, which is what I was saying earlier. And thus, gunpowder will ignite, and a bullet or a gun can fire in the vacuum of space or on the moon. So Google says
so. Why don't we?
Shot, wouldn't it?
Why don't we arm our astronauts then?
Well, we did. How do you think Neil Armstrong killed those creatures from Proxima Centauri that were trying to take over the Apollo 11?
The ones with the chemtrails.
Yeah, the ones that have been putting out the chemtrails. So, he didn't ever talk about that landing very much, and that's how he did it. So that it's all coming together now. Brent, really appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
Makes it clear. So, and now we know why they didn't take over the ship.
All right, we have another caller. Steve is calling from Centennial. What you got, Steve?
Well, I just had a statement to make. First of all, in my younger days, I was, I want to say, I couldn't say unfortunate. I was fortunate enough to get myself in a couple of minor infractions to where I had the pleasure of having a probation officer. And thank God for this man. His name is Jim Rice. And he set me on the straight and narrow. He said he took a lot of time to sit down with me as a young man and steer me in the right direction. And after the Army and the Marine Corps and several other adventures in my life, I found that path and I stayed on the straight and narrow. What? And I'm very fortunate and thankful because most of my family's in law enforcement. And my other question was, my folks say we own a concealed weapons permitting facility in Texas. And I grew up shooting and going through classes and everything. And today, I'm still a concealed carry license holder here in Alabama now. And the pamphlet they give you, it tells you which states that it's reciprocal through. But I'd like to know and hear from you guys just which all states it is reciprocal through, because I have long since lost that pamphlet. Now, I know we travel all over the United States, my wife and I, and I'm not going to wait till retirement to travel. I'm going to do it now while I can still do it.
And you're talking about your Alabama concealed carry or one from Texas?
My Alabama concealed carry.
Well, the only place you want to go is south of the Mason-Dixon line, of course. So,
sure.
And I'll tell you, a strange thing about it is South Carolina, it is not reciprocal. Now, I hadn't looked up the specifics about that, but the best thing I can tell you to do, because I could rattle them off, generally it's the left coast that is not reciprocal. California, Oregon, Washington, wouldn't you figure? And then most of New England. But the best way to look, there's a website called handgunlaw.us.
Okay.
And or if you want to spend $1.99 and you got a smartphone, you can get a program called CCW from Workman. I think it's Technology or something like that, LLC.
Okay.
It has all of that on there. $1.99.
I know my pamphlet said that I was good through Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, Michigan, Missouri, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, and mostly all the states we travel through.
You aren't good in New Mexico, South Carolina, Illinois, and for some Nebraska, and of course New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts.
Sure. Now Illinois, it's not reciprocal. I don't believe.
They just got the right to have one themselves.
Yeah, Illinois is and we've been to Chicago several times. It's a lovely place to visit, but I sure wouldn't want to live there.
That's right. Most of the places you'd want to go, it's reciprocal. But check that site out, because it tells you more than just that, what the laws are, like whether you have to identify if you're stopped by a police officer, whether you have to identify that you have a firearm. It tells you all the laws of those states.
Well, unfortunately, I have been stopped over the last year, because my wife and I, we do a lot of travel. I mean, I work 4 on 4 off, and I'm basically only work 6 months out of the year. So it's a dream job.
Well, you had a job just like Jody here.
and I've unfortunately been stopped by police officers for going over the speed limit, unfortunately. Right. And, I've never gotten a ticket. I've always gotten a warning. And the first thing I do is I hand my license and my permit and let them know that I am indeed armed, and so is my wife.
Well, you don't say F you to them? That's what you're supposed to say, F you. Why did you stop me? That always gets the conversation started off properly.
But don't take the Marlboro out of your mouth when you do it.
It's always been a very good experience, and I even made a point to call the station the last time I got stopped on the other side of Baton Rouge to let them know what a pleasurable experience it was. Even though I was speeding, I was in the wrong, but that's the worst thing I could do nowadays is get a speeding ticket, So
yeah.
But I love your program. I'm a first-time caller, and I try to catch y'all every time I get a chance on Tuesdays.
We thank you. Appreciate that. Keep listening.
Y'all keep up the good work.
We'll be back after the break. Thank you. We'll be back with Armed Alabama.
This program is a production of Armed Alabama, LLC. The comments and views of the hosts are those of Armed Alabama, LLC, for which it is solely responsible. The view and comments of the callers, guests, and texters do not necessarily represent the views of the sponsors or advertisers of Armed Alabama, LLC, or of Armed Alabama, LLC, Bigler Broadcasting, LLC, FM Talk 1065, or WAVH. No comments from Judge Jody Johnston should be taken as legal advice, but as educational information. Judge Johnston is not engaged in the practice of law and should not be sought out to answer legal questions off the air. Seek legal advice from a qualified attorney who knows the complete specifics of your legal matter.
Step up to the firing line. Armed Alabama is back. Questions, comments, and texts at 343-0106.
Charge of this man.
No longer, madam. He is now in the custody of the Ministry of Science.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape.
That's hilarious.
Follow that if you
Call in if you saw that at the Sanger Theater when it first played in Mobile, because I was probably in the theater with you, and I loved those little plastic oranges that were filled with orange. It wasn't juice, probably. Remember, Charlie, that you had a straw in them?
Got a quick update. A friend of mine texted in and said, we were speaking earlier about firing a firearm on the moon and how far it would go. It would go 6 times further because there's less gravity on the moon. And then also due to not only the less gravity, but the less air resistance.
It had to do that in order to pierce the shell of those aliens, because they have like a biometric shell that they grow, an exoskeleton, and it's harder than bone. So it had to do that. That's why the NASA put those. They actually were one of the early forms of the AR that they put on the capsules. So it had to do that. Full metal jacket too.
But the bullet would have to reach escape velocity to keep going.
Yeah.
Which would be about 1/6 of 7 miles per second.
That's why we have these little meteorites show up every now and then. Those aren't meteorites. Those are the leftover
bullets.
Yeah.
Oh, we got a caller. Frederick is calling from Mobile. What you got?
Turn your radio down.
Okay.
Or as Art Bell would say, extinguish your radio.
Otherwise, it isn't going to work.
Do what?
There, you got it off?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I did.
Great. What you got?
Well, in 1995, it was leading up to divorce, and my ex-old lady was running around on me, and I tried to step her one night, and I just grabbed her shirt, She had me locked up in jail for third-degree assault. Over here in Mississippi, it ain't nothing. They don't charge nobody with that. Now, I'm like, I don't want to make the issue out of it or not.
Okay. Well, did you get convicted?
Well, we went to court, and she tried to drop the charges, and that Carolina court wouldn't let her do it. So I was convicted of third-degree assault.
Third degree.
$300 fine, and I paid it.
Now, it wasn't domestic violence, was it? It was assault?
I guess you could call it domestic violence, because she was leaving, and I left her. I divorced her. We ain't married no more. It hadn't been over 20 years. And I can't buy any kind of a hunting gun, can't buy anything without on my record.
Okay.
And what I do about that?
Well, that's a toughie because that is the Lautenberg Amendment got him on that one. If it was domestic violence, now you need to check and see what that was, because Jody, help me on this one. As I recall, it went back retroactively and banned ownership of anyone who had been convicted of a domestic violence offense, even if it were a misdemeanor, and even if it wasn't an offense, even if it wasn't when the time you committed it, and that used to be called an ex post facto law. Is that the way you understood the so-called Lautenberg? Because it called a lot of police officers.
Yes, sir. That's exactly my understanding. And my short-term immediate suggestion to you, Mr. Frederick, is either buy a camera or a crossbow. Or you can get a compound bow or a recurve bow, and they'll certainly stick a hole in anything you're going to shoot at.
Now, I'd want to buy a handgun just to keep in my house for my own protection, because I've been robbed twice here.
Maybe you need to move.
Well, let me ask you, were you robbed or burglarized? I mean, did somebody come in your house with a gun or a knife and threaten you, say, give me all your stuff or I'll kill you?
No.
Okay, so it's a burglary.
Yeah.
Okay. Find out what you either pled guilty to or were convicted of, because if it was an assault third, it doesn't apply. It sounds like it was a domestic violence case, but you had to have been represented by an attorney.
Go to jail so she can leave.
Well, that doesn't really matter. You can go to jail for that long for a speeding ticket most of the time. It just depends on what happened. But as I remember, and I'm having to dig this out of the dark recesses of my mind, you have to have been represented by an attorney also. And
well, I didn't have one when I first
well, you need to check up on that, because you can move to have that set aside even all these years later. Because if you didn't have an attorney and you pled guilty to that, that does not apply.
Well, I didn't plead guilty to it.
But you have a trial?
Well, at the court, she wanted to drop the charge, and Sterling wouldn't let her drop it.
Well, it doesn't matter.
She charged me anyway.
That doesn't matter. It's the city or the state bringing the charges. She's just a witness. But did you have a trial?
No.
Well, you either had to plead guilty
and got fined $300 for third-degree misdemeanor.
Well, now just listen to me. Don't say anything.
Okay.
Did people testify down there? Like the police officer, or did she testify?
No, she didn't. She wanted to drop the charges.
Well, I know what she wanted. Wait. I know what she wanted, but they didn't let her. You can't be convicted unless you either pled guilty or had a trial. So that's the first thing. Go down and get a certified copy of that conviction and find out what you were convicted of. Call us when you do that, okay?
What do I do then?
You call us when you get a certified copy of that conviction.
Yeah.
Okay?
So I got a friend, a long-time friend. He's a judge up in Lucedale.
Well,
he spent 28 years as a Mississippi State Trooper. Now he won a judgeship last year. He told me over in Mississippi, he said, we don't charge people for stuff like that. It's thrown out of court.
Well,
A third degree.
Well, this was in Alabama, and it's already happened, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So you get the Jody. You wanted to add something?
Yes, sir, Mr. Frederick. If I could offer a suggestion to you,
Yeah.
I own my own company, and I'd be happy to look into that for you. It's Jody Highfield Mitigation / Investigations LLC, and my number is 648.
Wait just a minute.
Sure.
All right, just now. Six, 4, 8.
4312. Again, that number is 648-4312. And if you'll contact me, and I'll set an appointment with you, and we can take a look at this.
What do you want me to do? Go back to Sarah?
No, don't do anything. Call him.
Huh?
Call him.
Okay.
All right. You take care.
You too. See,
All right.
what I'm doing is,
All right. You know, I saw one of those set aside like that years later because, you know, the requirement is you have to have an attorney to do that, which, you know, you can plead guilty to a lot of things without an attorney, but that was one that they imposed that they just didn't want. Another one is to eventually convict someone of a felony DUI. You have to have had an attorney in the misdemeanor DUIs because the sentence ultimately imposed is so severe. So I'm pretty sure that's one of the requirements. Of course, that whole thing is really outrageous because when you pled guilty, the penalty that was going to be imposed did not include losing your right to own a firearm. So we got to step into a break, Mr. Producer. All right, let's do it. We'll be back with Armed Alabama. Last time I went out of the country, I arranged for him and Matt Canovi to come rescue me if I got kidnapped. So, fortunately, that did not happen. In fact, I guess I can probably admit this now. I was in London one time when they were having a wave of bombings, and I knew, you know, all the precautions, don't leave packages. But what do you do when you have a suitcase that handles break? You buy another one, and I unzipped it, so exposing the inside, and left it in a train station near a trash can. Well, my wife and I go in to eat. We come out, and it's surrounded by 100 firemen, bomb squad.
Robots.
Yeah, this is 20 years ago, so I assume all the statute of limitations have passed.
Didn't you have the homemade clock in there with it?
And I tried to do that, but you know what do you do? It was a semi-hard suitcase, so there wasn't. I couldn't wind it up and put it in the garbage can. Let's see. We got Keith on the line from Daphne. Hey, Keith.
Hey man, how you doing?
Fine. How about you? What can we try to answer for you?
Yeah, I guess I'm doing all right. I've been listening to y'all's guys' show for a while, driving home from work in the afternoon and whatnot. I lived in Chilton County back sometime, was going through a divorce, and had custody of my small child at the time. In the court system, I'd proved that my wife was sleeping with her attorney and all kind of other things. Well,
that's juicy.
Yeah, he had advised her to, go to a Walmart and say that I'd pushed her down, and I really never had. I had witnesses that I was at home, but I didn't even really know how to warrant. When I got to court, they kind of brought it up in court that there was a warrant for my arrest.
And you didn't get out of the courthouse, did you?
Not that day.
Yeah.
I got extradited to clear and make bond, got out, went to the courthouse there about 3 or 4 times. She didn't show up. And I was having to take off work each time, and I went up to the guy that was actually an attorney that was, being the judge for the the small town there in Clear. And I'm like, man, how many more times have I got to come up? And she's not showing up.
Right.
She's not going to show up. I mean, I'm having to miss work. I've got kids to support. And he got mad about it, and he's like, just show up next time. Well, I showed up next time, and she was there. And I hired an attorney while I was there. He went up and asked for another opportunity in 2 more weeks to come back and have my witness, make sure she was there, and the guy wouldn't grant it. He said, well, he really don't have a reason to do that. We're not even going to have a trial. We're just going to appeal it. We're going to move it to Columbiana, which was the seat of the county at the time. And I'm like, well, that's fine. So, we left that day, and he called me back and said, well, show up on a Friday. Well, I showed up on a Friday, and the judge gave a big spiel about they had 5,000 cases. They only had time to hear about 200 of them before
Woe is me,
so on and so forth. So I'm like, he said, you'll have a trial next week. We're going to get a jury up. We'll let you know. Well, I went to work. I worked a second shift job, and I went out and checked my phone at up to 12 o'clock I was available. Well, I went out and checked my phone at 6 from my job, and I got a voicemail from my attorney to be at court at 2 at 1:30. And I'm in Bessemer, Alabama, which there was no way I could have been there. So I showed up. He said, well, the judge got you for failure to appear. She didn't appear. He should have thrown it out. That's what my attorney told me. But he didn't. They can fall back on what was said in Calera, and you would have to go to jail. You can appeal to the appellate courts. But, I've got kids to raise. I can't say that I'm not going to pay $800 fine and just walk away from this.
Right.
And say, okay, I'm guilty. He said, don't argue with the judge because he just put you in jail. Da, da, da. So, I was railroaded through the system. I didn't do anything. Later in life, she draws a check now for being bipolar. So she had mental health issues then. And a lot of that, that comes with that. I hadn't done anything to that woman. And, that was my situation. And, up until here recently, I went to get a permit for a gun.
Well, let me mention something before you go. An old judge friend of mine said, he's now deceased, most judges in the state ought to be selling fruit and vegetables out of a truck by the side of the road. I'm not saying that. He said it. So, okay, what's your next issue? Now, you went to get a gun permit.
Well, they told me that, you've got this Class C harassment, a misdemeanor thing, but it's a domestic violence.
Oh, jeez. Well.
And I'm like, well, yeah, but, and I said, well, I've had a pistol permit before. And they're like, well, yeah, but the law didn't come into effect after that. And, it kind of disheartens me because I've really never done anything. The court system actually protected a lawyer when I went back with the tape, because what happened was because my ex-wife was bipolar, I had her security code to her cell phone at the time.
Let me ask you a question. When were you convicted, or when did that happen? What year?
Oh, Lord, I was 26 years old, and I'm, in my 40s now.
So, 25 years ago?
14 years ago.
Okay. I was going to say, he might be a candidate for a pardon. We're getting 20 years or more. It was a misdemeanor case. They deny 90-something%, but he might be one.
Keith, let me ask you a question. Were you convicted in district court or a city court, either in Columbiana or?
I went to the county. The county. It was actually
must have been the circuit court, because you said jury.
It was, but I never had a jury trial. They got me for not showing up, but I never really had time to show up. They called me at 1:30, and I was at work at 6. I was at court on a Friday, but on that Monday, they were supposed to give me a day's notice, and they didn't. The lawyer called me while I was at court, and he told me, he said, I was in the yard doing my garden, and he said, the judge told me I didn't get so time to be at court. Well, there's no way I could be there. They didn't even call me.
Well, let me try and offer a potential remedy to you, Keith. Where are you living now? Are you living in Calera, Columbiana? What's your county seat?
He's in Daphne.
Daphne, okay. Just go to the Probation and Parole office there in Bay Minette and tell them you want to apply for a pardon, a full pardon. if you were only convicted of a misdemeanor, you didn't lose your civil and political rights, but you have lost your gun ownership rights, which the Alabama Board of Pardons and Paroles can restore. So that's my suggestion to you on a quick remedy for your particular situation. And that won't cost you a penny either.
And tell them everything you've told us, but in a slower, because we're on the radio, in a slower, more measured, and it may not work, but it may very well. And how long would that take? 6 months to go through the system?
They would have to give him an initial process. By my last recollection, it'd be within 45 days.
Okay.
But now the other end of it, there is no stipulation or a time frame, so it could take a very long period of time.
Yeah, well,
but if you stay on top of it,
a long time,
they'll stay on top of it also.
Yeah.
Right. Well, what about the issue of the money? I mean, I don't mind spending the money. I didn't do it. That's not really an issue of that.
You're talking about the money you spent 26 years ago?
No, I don't mind spending money to hire an attorney if there's anything I can do with that.
I don't believe that. That's not my recommendation.
I think it would hurt you, don't you think?
I do believe so. Just go to the probation parole office there in Bay Minette and tell them what you want to do, and that's you want to file for a full pardon.
Thank you for the
Now,
information.
Is
I
there
will
one
definitely do
particular officer that handles those?
No, sir. They spread it out.
Is there anybody in the office? Because I would tell him particular person, but just go over there and that's a good office.
Yes, sir.
And do that. And good luck to you, because that's bad.
Yeah, well, it's not a perfect world we live in.
Yeah, well, those things happen, but that wouldn't happen if I was your judge. But that's another story. But good luck
Well,
to
if
you.
I'd had a good attorney, but at the time it really wasn't anything but a fine. He told me it'd be cheaper than having to go back to jail and set the whole sentence out while you were waiting for the other. And I mean, it really wasn't an option.
Right. Okie doke. Well, good luck to you. Give us a report
Bye-bye.
back too. Let us know what happens.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Right. Well, that's another terrible case, but you got to fight for your rights. And the other thing you got to do, you don't want your car searched. You got to say, I don't want my car searched. If you don't want to plead guilty to something, say, I'm not pleading guilty to something. You can't be passive because people will take advantage of you. Let's see. We got 2 minutes, but let's he was left over. All right. Trying to find something here. Yeah, you can't be passive about your rights. You've got to, I've seen so many people that, well, I was forced to plead guilty. Well, if it was directed to me, I never forced anybody to plead guilty. I spent about 30 minutes going through all their rights. Do you want to do this? You understand that you are agreeing to this? Has anybody forced you? Has anybody tortured you? Is anybody... Funny, they always answered, no, nobody's forced me. I'm doing this freely, under the influence of drugs or alcohol, no. And then, 10 years later, I was forced to plead guilty. Well, they were forced to because they were getting probation instead of that potential life term in the penitentiary. That maybe had something to do with it. One thing, we'll maybe bite into little Adams. I want you to describe our pay dockets, which you were a great part of, our pay or stay dockets that we used to collect $10,000, $20,000 sometimes from people who owed court costs. And that'll take a minute or two when we had the phone set up and all. But we'll let people, when we come back, we'll get into that. And because it collected a lot of money, but because of certain politics, we just had to cut it out. But we'll tell everybody about that when we come back from the break. And that and more. Well, I'm getting a stretch sign, so I guess we need a new timekeeper around here. All right. We'll be back in about 2 minutes on Armed Alabama. Listen to our wonderful commercials from our wonderful sponsors, and we'll be back to tell you that story.
Come back to Armed Alabama. We want to give a quick shout out to all our sponsors and advertisers. We want to thank them. Without them, we would not be on the air, and those are David Parnell at Palmer's Toyota, Dr. Justin Foster at Foster's Chiropractic of Tillman's Corner, David Grayson of Grayson Air Conditioning, McCoy Outdoors, of course, and the law office of Matt Green.
Now, I did something called pay or stay. You know, so shockingly, y'all, to most people, when folks would plead guilty to an offense, they would owe probably $700 to $1,700 in court costs. Part of that was maybe $500-600 attorney's fees, and then the state tried to make the court system pay for itself. It didn't quite do that, but I would let people pay $25 to $50 a month, and they'd owe state probation. Never $35.
Oh, it started out when I left. It was $40 a month. So.
Well, shockingly, people would go 6 months and wouldn't pay a dime. That was part of the deal. You know, I could have revoked them for not paying, but so we would call them down there, and I would figure, you know, hey, you would have owed $300, $400 had you been paying. And so we called them all in, and I had the court police block the back doors. We had restrooms in there and all, and they could not leave until we finished calling the docket. We had telephones available, so they could call people that might have money, and sometimes they had a check, and I know one in particular, their girlfriend went and cashed the check and never came back. But the threat was to put them in jail. Very few had to be put in jail, but you had all your people come down there, and I think that had an effect. It frightened people, and they started paying for a while.
Yes, sir. I think it had a very positive effect because just the consternation and duress someone is involved in when they're signing that order of probation in court. They're not really paying attention. The only thing that they're hearing is that you get to walk out of the courtroom instead of going back to Metro jail.
And that's a victory, you know.
And that's certainly considered a victory. And then as far as the money goes, since it's not like a power bill where we're going to shut your power off, it's often neglected and probably the easiest thing to be neglected.
Right.
When you bring someone back to court, it lets them know without any uncertainty and without any doubt in their mind that the court system is certainly interested in getting their money. And once they understand that, they pay up. And it's a very effective tool, and I think it was a very worthwhile program that Judge Johnston instituted.
Well, what ended it is a judge in Birmingham was doing something similar to that. JIC, which is a wholly corrupt body, brought charges against her because they said, you're taking indigents. Well, I knew the difference between someone who's indigent, being old, crippled, can't get a job, and a 23-year-old who has $300 running shoes on and, you know, everything that goes with it, and somebody's not trying to work. And but my DA came to me and told me about that, and I said, well, you're right. The heck with it. So we'll just forego the $100,000 nearly we were bringing in every year. And why fight the system? Quickly, let me read the Facebook question. And for you, Jody, Judge, do I understand it correctly that if someone has been questionably convicted of a domestic violence charge, that there's a chance of applying for a pardon? I think they're all in the same boat because most people say I was really innocent. You know, I mean, I would not bring the charge into question because it looks like you're one of these nuts that, you know, hey, I was set up, you know, the whole world was against me. I think that part of applying for a pardon is that, hey, I'm guilty, no question about it, but I have learned my lesson.
I fully concur with Judge Johnston on that statement. You're trying to split hairs and mitigate something that's already happened, which if you pled or were found guilty of a crime, then you're convicted of that crime.
If it was questionable, you should have appealed it.
And, you know, you can't unring a bell. So the conviction stands, and at this point, the remedy would be a pardon. To apply for the pardon through the Alabama Board of Pardons and Paroles is absolutely free. Don't let anyone attempt to charge you money for applying for a pardon investigation. Now, of course, it's obviously up to the parole board whether or not to grant or deny that pardon. But once again, you're crying over spilled milk, and a conviction will stand because it's convicted, and you cannot unring a bell.
Makes you sound like a bitter person. Okay, our next caller is it Todd? Todd, kind of be quick with us. We're down to the line.
Okay, I was going to say this conversation is somewhat academic because in the heat of the moment, most likely your attorney is also recommending that you take a plea. It's set up, in my mind, it's set up so that the DA has a perfect conviction. Well, we're going to bring murder one, but we'll take a plea for jaywalking. It's like anything they can get. And your attorney's going, by the way,
I know
never needed an attorney, but they're saying, I recommend you take it.
I know how it is. And let me tell you, I've seen plenty of people that I thought they weren't guilty of what they pled guilty to, but they still did the act. In other words, they still did something. They may not have committed manslaughter, but they may have committed actually criminally negligent homicide. They still did the act.
I agree, but why not bring that charge against them rather than the homicide?
It's called charge bargaining because they know that it's like going and buying a Persian rug.
And that's where the deck's stacked against most people. By the way, I've never needed an attorney except when I evicted someone. I'm just saying, that like impound lots.
Oh yeah, that's another story. Hey, got to get one more call in, but you're right. We'll talk about that one week. That's a good subject. Thank you for calling, Marcus. Make it kind of quick. We got not long.
Well, I was charged with assault in first degree 20 years ago. I was in an automobile accident. I was involved in a head-on collision. I was drinking and driving, and I was charged with assault in the first degree. And Judge Reed in Fairhope was the judge that I went before. And I was wondering if 20 years later, if there's anything I can do to get my voting rights and gun rights or any of that kind of stuff back.
What were you convicted of that?
Yes.
Okay. Same thing, 20 years may not be, but it doesn't hurt to try. But go to Bay Minette, to the Pardon and Parole office, and you can apply for it there. But like we said before, don't argue, hey, it was a big mistake. If this is true, hey, I used to be an alcoholic, but I'm still an alcoholic, but I hadn't had dropped a drink in 20 years, or whatever the case. Right. Don't argue over, stuff like that. Admit you had a problem.
I like I said, I pleaded guilty to it. So
that's a better attitude. That's a good attitude. But yeah, give that a try. Doesn't hurt.
Okay, where's their office located, Bay Minette?
It's that main. It's the same highway that Faulkner State University's on. I forget the name of the road, but if you're coming out of Loxley, it's just straight up the highway till you get to Bay Minette.
Yeah, is that 59 or 31? One of them. But
okay.
You can find them in the phone book and just call them. Ask. Well, there's no phone book. I guess you got to go on the internet.
Okay.
But you can get a hold of them. All right, got to run.
Thank you.
Thank you. Adam, close this out.
All right, glad you could join us for the full 2 hours tonight. We had a really good show. We're so glad you could join us. We want to thank retired parole officer Jody Highfield for joining us. Thank you so much, Jody. And be sure and join us next week. And also listen up and look out on our website for the class that we're going to have. We're going to post a class for January sometime, probably late January. But be on the lookout for that. If you have any questions regarding our classes or just general questions regarding Armed Alabama, or if you have a good topic that you think might be relevant for one of our shows, be sure to email me. Email me at Adam at Armed Alabama, or the Judge at Armed Alabama, and we'd be glad to hear from you.
Our YouTube channel has an archive of all of these Facebook videos, too.
And you can go to our website as well. It's armedalabama.com. You can listen to all of our previous shows on podcast. Until